Summary of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. The events of the first part of the novel take place in Concord, Massachusetts, in the year 1860, only a few days before Christmas. The four March girls, 16-year-old Meg, 15-year-old Jo, 13-year-old Beth, who is weak but religious, and 12-year-old Amy, who is beautiful, live alone with their mother, Mrs. March. Their dad, Mr. March, has signed up to be a chaplain in the Union Army, leaving his wife and girls to take care of themselves. Even though they are poor, the March family has a good heart. Their love for each other and their strong Christian values keep them going. When the girls wake up on Christmas morning, they each find a copy of Pilgrim's Progress, which is an allegory about Christian morals. Together, they decide to read a little bit from their books every day and act on the lessons they learn. Meg and Jo meet Laurie, the grandson of Mr. Lawrence, the rich neighbor of the March family, at a dance put on by a wealthy family in the area. Laurie stays with the March family for a long time, and old Mr. Lawrence becomes friends with the girls and acts as a substitute grandpa to them. The teacher for Laurie, Mr. Brooke, also stays with the March family, and he is especially fond of Meg. During the next year, the girls face a number of tests that put what they learned from reading Pilgrim's Progress to the test. Meg, who is vain, cuts off a lock of her hair, and Amy, who is full of herself, gets beat up in front of her friends at school when it is found that she has been saving pickled limes in her desk. Jo, who is so angry that she can't see, lets Amy fall into an icy river. At the end of the year, they find out that their father is sick, so Mrs. March goes to Washington, D.C., with Mr. Brooke, to take care of him. Beth gets scarlet fever while Mrs. March is away, and she gets so sick that the March girls and their helper Hannah worry she won't make it. Beth's illness finally goes away the morning Mrs. March comes back from Washington, which is a relief for everyone. On Christmas, Laurie tells Mrs. March and her girls that Mr. March has come home early, which is a treat for them. Mr. March looks at his girls and is happy with how they have changed since he has been gone. Soon after that, Mr. Brooke goes up to Meg and asks her to marry him. She agrees, but on the condition that they wait 3 years before getting married. Everyone in the March family celebrates, except for Jo, who wants her sister to stay at home. Meg's wedding to Mr. Brooke starts off part 2. The wedding is a simple event that takes place at the home of the March family. Then, she and Mr. Brooke start their new life at the Dovecot, their small home. Not long after that, Meg has twins, Daisy and Demi. Jo, on the other hand, is working hard on her writing. Soon, she sells a few of her stories and songs to a local newspaper and uses the money from those sales to take Beth and Mrs. March on vacation. Rich Aunt March trusts Amy because of how well-mannered she is. Amy also makes an impression on Aunt Carol, a distant but rich cousin, who decides to take Amy on a trip to Europe with her. Soon after that, Jo chooses to move to New York for the winter to get away from Laurie, who is crazy about her. Jo meets Friedrich, a kind German professor, at the boarding house where she works as a babysitter. Laurie approaches Jo when she gets back from New York and asks for her hand in marriage. Laurie is crushed when Jo says no to him. Then, Mr. Lawrence takes him on a trip to Europe, where he meets Amy right away. Back at home, Beth's health is getting worse. Beth dies soon after Jo takes her to the beach for one last trip. Amy finds comfort in her friendship with Laurie when she hears about Beth's death. Laurie finds out that Amy was always his true love. He and Amy fall in love and decide to run away together. The night before Jo's 25th birthday, they go home. On the same night, Professor Bear shows up out of the blue. At the end of his stay, he asks Jo to marry him, and she says yes. There are 5 years. Jo and Bear are married and have 2 boys. When Aunt March dies, they will get her house. Jo and Bear turn it into Plumfield School. Mrs. March's 60th birthday is the last event in the book. The March family as a whole gets together in the apple field and talks about how lucky they are to have each other. Mrs. March thinks that the love she has for her family is the most important thing in her life.
About the author. Louisa May Alcott was born in 1832. Both of her parents were important people in the Transcendentalist movement. Bronson Alcott, her father, is often called the father of modern education in the US. Even though he was smart, he was bad with money. Because of this, the Alcotts lived in poverty that was much worse than the poverty that the March family enjoyed. Louisa had to start working when she was very young to keep her family from going hungry. Alcott, like Joe, wanted to be a writer, so she turned to writing pulp fiction to make money for her family. She went on to write for the Atlantic Monthly. Her first big success came when 1863's Hospital Sketches, a collection of her pieces, came out. When the first part of Little Women came out in 1868, it made Alcott a well-known writer. Alcott was a strong supporter of ending slavery, a feminist, and a single woman until she died in 1888.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.